When we read Genesis 6 verses 1 to 4, the passage is brief yet startling. It tells us about the sons of God taking the daughters of men as wives, producing a race of giants, the Nephilim. In most church teachings, this account is simplified. Fallen angels, corrupted in rebellion, took human women and produced hybrid offspring of extraordinary size and strength. But what if this is only the surface layer? What if, hidden in the folds of ancient texts, there's a darker, stranger detail, that among these unions, there may have been female giants walking the earth? The idea isn't just wild imagination, it finds roots in ancient literature such as the Book of Enoch. While not part of the official biblical canon, Enoch's writings were respected in early Jewish tradition and referenced in the New Testament, Jude 1 verses 14 to 15. In these accounts, the Watchers, fallen angels, not only fathered giants but also presided over a world that was rapidly filling with hybrid creatures. The product of forbidden mixing between species. If male giants existed, could female giants also have been part of this strange and corrupted world? And if so, who did the male giants marry? These questions push us to reconsider the simple image of Nephilim as merely giant warriors. Instead, we are looking at an expanding bloodline, potentially self-sustaining through unions between giant males and giant females. This would explain why, even after the flood, giants appear again in biblical history, such as the Anakim, Rephaim, and Goliath's family. The possibility of giant women changes the conversation entirely. It means the corruption of human DNA was not only a one-time event before Noah but could have been preserved and reintroduced. While the canonical scriptures don't explicitly mention female giants by name, there are intriguing hints. The Bible speaks of entire nations of giants, the Anakim, Rephaim, and Emim, not merely isolated individuals. Deuteronomy 3 verse 11 mentions King Og of Bashan, whose bed measured over 13 feet long. If he ruled a kingdom of giants, it stands to reason that women of equal stature existed within his people. No kingdom sustains itself through a single miraculous birth, there must be a breeding population. This is where the theory of giant wives becomes plausible. Ancient Jewish and extra-biblical writings, like the Book of Giants, part of the Dead Sea Scrolls, go further. They describe Nephilim society, hinting at family structures and even rivalries among giant clans. If male giants only married human women, their offspring would gradually lose their gigantic traits over generations due to genetic dilution. Yet, biblical history records recurring encounters with giants long after the flood. This persistence suggests a more direct method of maintaining the bloodline, through giant-to-giant unions. The presence of female giants also aligns with the spiritual corruption described in Genesis 6 verse 12, all flesh had corrupted its way on the earth. The corruption was not limited to men or angels, it affected entire ecosystems, potentially altering human, animal, and hybrid forms. Female giants could have been a natural consequence of the fallen angels' interference, just as hybrid animals are mentioned in other ancient traditions. This leads to an unsettling possibility: the Nephilim weren't merely a temporary aberration but a coordinated attempt to permanently alter humanity's God-given design. Female giants, therefore, would have been key to sustaining that corrupted race, ensuring that their presence could resurface in later generations, and perhaps even in the end times. If the existence of female giants was such a logical possibility, why is it almost never discussed in mainstream Christian teaching? Part of the answer lies in the complex nature of ancient theological debates. The early church, as it took shape in the centuries after Christ, faced a monumental task: preserving the purity of the gospel while combating heresy, pagan myths, and distorted spiritual ideas. Stories of giants, and especially female giants, tread dangerously close to the mythologies of surrounding cultures, such as Greek tales of titans or Mesopotamian gods. Leaders may have feared that openly discussing these ideas would cause the faith to be confused with paganism. Additionally, the concept of female giants raises uncomfortable theological questions about the depth of corruption before the flood. If the image of God in humanity was being systematically rewritten through hybridization, this goes beyond a simple moral fall into sin. It paints a picture of a deliberate, physical alteration of God's creation, something that many theologians preferred to frame as purely spiritual, not genetic. The idea that the Nephilim bloodline could have survived by natural reproduction, involving both male and female giants, adds weight to the notion of an ongoing spiritual war with physical consequences. There is also the issue of dangerous knowledge. The more detailed the discussion about the mechanics of these unions, the closer one gets to speculative territory that can distract from core doctrines. Some leaders may have chosen to focus on the moral and spiritual lessons, God's judgment in the flood, the call to holiness, rather than explore unsettling biological scenarios. Over time, the omission became tradition, and tradition became perceived as the whole truth. But omitting a detail doesn't erase it from history. If ancient texts outside the Bible, and careful readings within it, hint at giant societies, then the wives of the giants, and the female giants themselves, remain a valid subject for deeper study, especially in the light of prophecy. The Bible makes a curious statement in Matthew 24 verse 37, "As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man." This verse suggests that conditions on earth before the flood will, in some way, repeat before Christ's return. If the days of Noah were marked not only by widespread sin but also by the presence of Nephilim, then the possibility of female giants, and the preservation of their genetic line, takes on prophetic significance. Consider this: after the flood, when humanity restarted through Noah's family, giants still appear later in Scripture. We see the Anakim in Canaan, Numbers 13:33, the Rephaim, Deuteronomy 3 verse 11, and individual figures like Goliath and his kin, 2 Samuel 21 verses 15 to 22. How did they survive if all flesh outside the ark perished? One possibility is that their genetic material re-emerged through post-flood unions, either through human lines that carried trace Nephilim DNA or through a second incursion by fallen angels. But if female giants existed before the flood, the survival of the Nephilim bloodline could have been more deliberate and structured than we imagine. This brings us into the realm of spiritual warfare. Revelation 12 speaks of Satan waging war against the offspring of God's people. If there is a physical as well as spiritual component to this war, then the re-emergence of Nephilim traits in the end times might serve the enemy's plan to oppose God's kingdom on earth. The idea of hybridization, mixing what God has separated, mirrors the original Genesis 6 rebellion. In that sense, female giants are not just a historical curiosity, they represent the potential for the corruption of humanity's design to persist across millennia. This understanding adds a new layer to prophetic interpretation. The days of Noah may not simply mean moral decline but could involve a repeat of the same genetic and spiritual corruption. If so, we are not just looking at a spiritual conflict between heaven and earth but a multidimensional war involving beings we have barely begun to understand. The question of the giants' wives may seem like an obscure footnote in biblical history, but it strikes at the heart of an ongoing, cosmic conflict. Genesis 6 is not just an ancient tale, it's a record of an intentional strategy to corrupt the human race, one that was so severe that God responded with a global judgment. If female giants existed, they were more than a curiosity, they were a key part of ensuring that the Nephilim lineage could persist beyond a single generation. Throughout Scripture, God repeatedly commands his people to separate from the nations that house giants. The conquest of Canaan, often viewed purely as a territorial campaign, also served as a targeted removal of these corrupted bloodlines. This context reframes events like the battle against Og of Bashan or David's confrontation with Goliath. They were not just military victories, but spiritual purges in a war stretching back to the pre-flood world. The possibility of female giants also explains why remnants of these beings appear after the flood. It suggests a continuity, a thread of rebellion that runs through human history, resurfacing in different forms. If the days of Noah are indeed a prophetic template for the end times, then the strange, disturbing realities of Genesis may 6 not be buried in the past. They could be part of our future. This is why early church leaders may have feared this discussion. It blurs the line between the spiritual and the physical, between theology and the tangible realities of a corrupted creation. But to ignore it is to miss a key piece of the Bible's warning. The giants' wives, whether mentioned directly or only hinted at, remind us that the war for humanity's destiny is fought on multiple fronts. And perhaps the most sobering truth is this: the battle lines drawn before the flood are still etched across our world today. To understand the giants' wives is to see the full scope of the enemy's plan, and to recognize the magnitude of God's victory over it.